Good evening. I am thankful for each of you being here with us this evening. I know the elders and others are glad that you are here as well. Tonight we are going to give a report on the work that was done while we were in Costa Rica, as this congregation supported the vast majority of the funds for that. But we won't talk only about the trip. But as has been mentioned before, we traveled to Costa Rica with Wayne Brewer. Many of you know who Wayne Brewer is. He works for the congregation there in Little Rock, Arkansas, the Mableville congregation. He's really their Hispanic, the minister of the Hispanic congregation there, and he does a lot of mission work during the year, or during parts of the year, I should say. Costa Rica, their students, their kids, were on their school break. They have 2 weeks off between when school ends and when school begins. So if you think your summer vacation is short, it's much longer than 2 weeks. You got them beat. We traveled to Costa Rica on July 3rd. That was on a Wednesday. Brother Mike got up graciously enough and drove us to the airport. Our flight was at 5 a.m., which means we had to be there at 3 a.m., which means we left our house about 2 a.m. And so at some point, we owe him a dinner at some point. But many people who traveled over there had similar flight schedules as well. But we did arrive there later that same day. This is one picture that Lisa took. She had the window seat, at least for part of it. And this is overlooking Costa Rica. And you can see some of the tops of the houses there and things. But we are reminded in Luke chapter 10 and verse 2 why we do trips like this. And that's because we want to try to reach out to those around the world, not just in our community, but around the world. Christ tells us there in Luke 10 and verse 2, the harvest truly is great, but laborers are few. Therefore, pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Luke 10 and verse 2. Now, this is a little bit of info about Costa Rica. It literally means rich coast. Its location, of course, is Central America. Its capital is San Jose. Its population is only 5 million. Its language is Spanish, but we had ladies there, men there who were speaking Spanish. They would tell you that Costa Rica Spanish and Spanish in Mexico are not the same thing. In fact, we were checking in, and one of the ladies there was trying to talk to the person at the desk, and she was asking her about payment and things. The lady kept asking, oh, you want to cancel? Oh, you want to cancel? No, we did not. But that was just one instance of how the Spanish was a little bit different. The currency in Costa Rica is called a colone. The population is about 47% Catholic. We ran into, when you're door knocking, of course, you have all kinds of different experiences and those who come from different backgrounds. And it's interesting, the very first day, I think probably like the second door that we knocked, Wayne and I were in a group, and Lisa and Chloe and I were in the same group. And we were knocking on the door, and we were talking to this man, and he said in Spanish, he said, I was raised a Catholic, and I'll die a Catholic. Well, it's pretty sad to think about, but he wasn't the only one who had that attitude. Now, we'll talk about later, we've met many people who have a much different attitude while we were there. We all know that, as I told one brother there, as we'll talk more about later, that the issues you find in Costa Rica or in other islands and places that I've been to in the past, and Lisa's done much more mission work than I have, being to Kiev, Ukraine, and things like that, that you'll find the same problems for people no matter where they are. The same problems we face here, the same problems they face over there. But again, turned away at the door is not an uncommon thing no matter where we are in the world. Of course, this is a bigger map of Central America. You see Costa Rica there between, just above, Panama. We flew from Kansas City to Miami, and then from Miami to San Jose, Costa Rica. But then we drove from San Jose to Tiburon. Now, if you've ever been on roads in other countries, you never know what to expect. When I did mission work in the Marshall Islands, the road was just one big pothole. You ride across, you never stopped moving. You're just bouncing all over the place. It was a very rough experience. Their roads weren't quite that bad, but when we were driving from San Jose to Tiburon, we left the airport, I think it was about 2, and maybe 2:30. We got to the hotel and began checking in about 8:30, 9 o'clock. And it rained the entire way from San Jose to Tilleron, where their hotel was. Now, I'm glad it was dark because you couldn't, one, see any dangers on the road when it's dark. And that'll come into play more when I'll talk about the mountain drive we took on the way back from Tilleron to San Jose. We took a different route. We actually would go north around the lake there and come back down, and we would take a whole different route, and it was through the mountains. And I have a fear of heights. And about only 50% of the roads have guardrails, and so I was hanging on to the door very tightly. But nonetheless, it's quite the experience. But we landed in San Jose, flew to Tilleron, and we worked with two congregations, one in Canis there on the left, and then Tilleron there next, closer to the lake there. We worked with Canis for the first part of the trip, and then with Tilleron the second part of the trip as well. And we had individuals from Canis and Tilleron working with each. When we were at Canis, brethren from Tilleron were there. When we were in Tilleron, brethren from Canis were there as well. And so they were working together. There were a lot of congregations nearby, or not nearby, not a lot of congregations in the area. But even though they weren't separated by very many kilometers, it could take you a long time to get there because of the terrain that was involved. This was our group who was here with us, that traveled with us. You have, I don't have a arrow link on this, but Diane Richardson is there in the center, and next to her is Michael Richardson. See, John Griffin is there next to Lisa. To the left of John is Diane. To the left of her is Michael. To the left of him there is Grant Mahan, and to the left of him is Josh Yarber, who is Clint Yarber's son, who will be here doing our gospel meeting. And then, I'm not going to go through everybody here, but we have people from, as we have here, from Arkansas, Missouri, obviously, Iowa, Tennessee, Texas, South Carolina, the U.S., from Mexico, and from Baja, California as well. And so we had, as Wayne said, we had a very large group. The little girl in the red did not travel with us. It's actually the minister's daughter, and she just wanted to be in the picture, and so she got in the picture. But anyway, and so we had quite a big group. I think Wayne says one of his larger groups, and which made it very difficult. We had 2 vans and 2 vehicles, and they were very full. When you have a very full vehicle driving very far on mountain roads, it's not very fun. But nonetheless, we had a very good group, very active group. Everybody here took part in teaching classes or in translating for someone. Brother Willie, who I can't remember his last name, who is right here. He is the head of the Spanish department there at Brown Trail, and he translated probably most of the time. He had to leave a little bit early, about 2 days early, to get back. But he translated most of the sermons. He translated, I think, all 3 of mine. And so, and Bible classes and things, and then Wayne translated a whole lot as well. And so they were very, very busy. The ladies had ladies who would translate for them in their classes as well, and for their children's classes. Our work involved work in both Canis and Tilleron, as I mentioned before. We distributed closer to 2,500 tracts, about 1,000 in Canis and about 1,500 there in Tilleron. And so we were in Canis from Wednesday, on Wednesday, and we were there from Thursday through Sunday. It was the last official day that we were there. So to distribute 1,000 tracts in just a few days' time was pretty good. And then in Tilleron, we distributed closer to 1,500 in the few days that we were there as well. You notice there 45 personal Bible studies were conducted in a 10-day period. You know, I always ask questions when I hear people have large numbers of baptisms, but when you go overseas and you start getting involved in work, you see that, interestingly, a lot of people overseas are a lot more interested in the gospel, or maybe in different countries, than what we find here. And we'll talk about that more later. One of the preacher there at Canis, and I actually had a conversation about that very thing. But we did have 45 personal Bible studies. We left over 20 contacts for those who wanted to be able to set up Bible studies at different times other than the days that we were there. And so each congregation had contacts which they could reach out to and to keep up with them, to reach out to those who haven't had a study yet, and to continue on studying with those who had Bible studies. And so they were following up with that. They weren't just having a Bible study or two and then leaving them. They were indeed following up with them. We also had daily afternoon Bible school. So what would usually what happened after we were there one day, altered a little bit because you had to alter your schedule to make time for Bible studies you had set up the day before. But in the mornings we would get up and we would drive to the church building. We would have a devotional. We'd have breakfast there, or not breakfast there. We'd have breakfast on our own. We would have a devotional there with the whole team and several of the members of the local congregation. And then we would go out and we would knock doors, or we had a Bible study, we'd hold a Bible study. And we'd do that to about noon, and we'd come back to the church building there, have lunch with the brethren. And then shortly thereafter, we would go to the local gym. Each congregation had set up to have Bible studies in a gym, which amazed me. Can you imagine trying to rent out a gym here from a school and have a vacation Bible school in it? I have a hard time believing that would happen, especially in 2024. But nonetheless, that's what they did. Each one had rented out or had set up the ability for us to have this vacation Bible school in their gym, which we'll show pictures of here in just a moment. And so we would do that every day from about 1:30 to 3:30. They would pick up the kids who the parents allowed for us to pick up, which was interesting. You imagine. Now they've been doing this for several years now, but you can imagine sending your child off with a group of Christians nonetheless, but in a van to have them driven to another place for a couple hours and trust they're going to be able to be brought back by people possibly you've never met before. But that's what they did. And they had several van loads of children they would go and pick up, bring them to the gym, have the classes and things, and then drive them back. And after we did that, then we go back to our hotel to get cleaned up and get ready for the evening gospel meeting and the children's classes. And we'd meet back at the church building there at 5 o'clock. We'd have dinner with the brethren at 5 o'clock. Then we would clean up everything, and then we'd have our gospel meeting. And during the sermon, the children would have classes in other rooms where they'd have classes for the children during the gospel meeting. After the gospel meeting, of course, we'd visit, and if you've ever been around, you know how it is here. We like to stay around and talk. Well, the same thing happened there, and so we get back pretty late some nights. And then, of course, we had Sunday Bible classes. We had sermons, and Lisa had a Sunday afternoon ladies class on the Sunday that we were there. She taught that. I think it was about an hour or so on a Sunday afternoon. Of course, we were involved in door knocking. This was every morning, with the exception of Sunday. You may notice we wrote that track. That's Chuck. It's actually a track on God-centered authority. And so we would have the flyer there. You can see a portion of it tucked inside of a Bible tract. So we went out and knocked doors. We'd, of course, invite them. We'd say, I would say, because I couldn't speak much Spanish, invitación to the Iglesia del Cristo, which is invitation to the Church of Christ. And they would hand in the flyer, and then we'd continue to talk with them and ask them, if they were attending anywhere, if they read their Bibles. People will tell you, honestly, right through the door, I don't read my Bible very much. They were doing that. Us, I think sometimes as Americans, we'd say, well, yeah, I read my Bible. In reality, we really don't. And they would tell you flat out, no, I don't read it. I have it. Yeah, I'm a member over here, but I haven't been in a very long time. We've been talking to that person for maybe a minute. And they're opening up, telling you these things, which told us this is a chance to talk with them about the Bible, to set up Bible studies, and we did just that. And I think for the time period we were there, we were very successful with that. But we'd pass out these, and when we went, again, about 2,500 in total. Chuck's was not the only one we passed out. Don't tell him I said that, but it wasn't the only one. There were others as well. But of course, we did pass out his and many others that have been translated into Spanish, many of which you're probably familiar with. This is a picture, of course, Chloe this is Justin, one of our team members there, who's a minister there in Alabama. And that's Susan there in the back. And they're approaching. You see bars on the door. That's the front of the house. Every house, if you've ever been to Mexico, you're probably used to seeing that. But there were bars in front of the house. You didn't knock on someone's door. You had to say, buenos dias, which is good morning. You'd shout it, which to me sounds weird to go up and shout at somebody's house, but that's what you would do. Then you might say upe, which means is anybody there. And they might come out, most of the time, probably about 75%, they came out to talk to you. Can you imagine if 75% of people came out to talk to you when you knocked on their door? I'm not saying that we shouldn't door knock here in the U.S., but I'll tell you that the reception is quite different from the U.S. than other places. And I've been to enough places to know, and I've done a lot of door knocking here to say it's not the same. But nonetheless, we'd have to shout or greet them through their at their house, hoping they'll come out and greet you and talk with you. And the vast majority would, even if they didn't want to have a study or anything, they'd still come out and talk to you. This is Lisa and I standing. You can't see there's another lady on the other side of that Jeep there who's leaving some material in the door. You see this is the orange house there. It's a good example. Another house, one of the rare times there's not bars in the window. Honestly, most of the time there's bars in the windows. And when you're walking through a neighborhood, and this isn't meant to be disrespectful or anything, but there are many times we'd ask, is this a house? Because we just didn't know. While you would have much nicer houses, and then you'd have houses you didn't know if it was a house or not, or apartment or not, and so you'd have to ask someone who was with you or just shout at whatever it was you're trying to see if someone had lived in there or not. This is one man who Lisa and I were walking, handing out some materials, and this was in, I don't know if now it was Canis or Tilleron, and we handed it out to him. He was actually selling fruit, and so I wasn't sure if he'd take it or not, but we handed it to him, and we walked on. She turned back and saw him reading it right away. She went ahead and slyly caught a picture of him doing so. Afternoon Bible school, as I mentioned already, was held in a local gym. This is at the gym in Canis. It is 85-ish degrees, humidity is about 90%, and there is no fans anywhere to be seen in a gymnasium. Air conditioning, forget about it. So when you walk in, it's just as hot as outside. The building is maybe even hotter. And so these kids are willing to sit there in the heat and to listen to Bible lessons. I think as adults, we can take a lesson from that, can't we? We should be willing to be a little bit uncomfortable physically to listen to a Bible lesson. They do so for an hour. It wasn't just a 10 or 15-minute lesson. This is an hour-long class I was teaching. This is Willie there translating for me. And we actually had a very good class. Many of them came up to me afterwards and was talking to me. I pulled out my phone, did a little Google Translate, but we did have a conversation with them. But it was very encouraging, and the class size just continued to grow each day we had a class. When we were in Tilleron, the first day they had youth class is like 5 or 6, and by the end of the week is closer to 12 or 15, I believe, is what one brother told me. This is, of course, Lisa teaching her children's class during the afternoon. Her, and then there's Susan there with her. And then you see another sister there sitting down next to Susan. That's her translator translating for the kids there into Spanish. I preached 3 sermons and taught 2 classes. Lisa taught 8 classes, so she outdid me. But no doubt there was plenty of work to go on. Anytime we weren't, for instance, if I wasn't teaching a VBS class, I would just simply go out and I would pass out material. Now in Canis, we did not do that, and I found out later because it's something called the Pan America Highway goes through there, which means it goes all the way up through those countries up into the U.S., which is known for having a lot of trafficking, as in children trafficking. And so I took no risk, and no one else did, really living very far from the gymnasium we were at there in Canis. I don't know how close the highway was, but we did not risk it. But when we got to Tilleron, we did do more of that because it wasn't anywhere near that highway. So in the afternoon, we didn't have a class. We would just go out and distribute flyers as best we could while others taught class. Evening gospel meeting and children's classes. This is me teaching, or preaching there rather, again, with Willie, who was translating for me. We had a very good turnout for each gospel meeting. I remember on one occasion there in Tilleron, one of the last few nights, they were bringing in chairs for people to sit in. And we already started, we were singing, and here come 10, maybe 20 chairs being brought in on each side of the auditorium for people to sit in because they were bringing their children as well. And it filled up very quickly. I don't remember which sermon of mine this was, They had themes. Um, the afternoon school in Canis, their lessons included David the shepherd, David fights Goliath, David with Saul and Jonathan, which is a lesson that I had, and David is crowned king. The children's classes, which were the same in Tileron or Canis, were Let Your Light Shine, Jesus heals the nobleman's son, Jesus heals 10 lepers, Jesus raises Lazarus, Jesus opens the eyes of the blind man, and the paralytic let down through the roof. So those were classes that were taught during the gospel meeting to the children. Wayne, as you can see there, Wayne Brewer in the bottom right, if you're friends with him on Facebook, you saw that he streamed pretty much everything. I have no idea how he had that good a signal. I don't want to see his data plan or his data total for that time period. I know what mine was, and it was higher than what it normally was, obviously. But anyway, he streamed all the sermons and many other things as well. I think one time we were driving down the road from Tileron to Canis. He's driving, and he has his phone out, and he's streaming to show people what we're seeing. He was comfortable, but I was not, because I was in the passenger seat up front. But he had been there many times, and he just doesn't seem too concerned about it. But anyway, this is Lisa and some others here teaching during the weeknight classes during the gospel meeting. You can see the translators there on the right, and then on the far left. I believe both of them were from Baja, California. The last night of the meeting, we had a baptism. This young lady, interesting enough, was out with my group that day distributing flyers, and she was there with us, knocking doors and things, and she decided that she wanted to be baptized. And they talked with her before that, and they talked with her during when she had made that decision. And then this baptistry is actually outside of the church building. So when she decided she wanted to be baptized, they had to go out there, make sure it was cleaned out, and then put water in it. Now, it's a pretty good-sized baptistry. It's pretty deep. You can see there's room for a lot of people. So they didn't fill it up very deep because it would take a lot longer to do so. So she had to, of course, kneel and lean back and get pretty low to get fully immersed. So she did do so. I don't have a picture of it here, but one of the ladies that we had studied with, that Willie has studied with, and I was there with him, she's not in the picture, but she actually was about right over here watching as this young lady was being baptized. And Willie and I had met with her, and Lisa and had met with her a few days before, and Willie had talked with her, and I was listening in. She caught on to Spanish a lot faster than I did. I pulled out my phone and let Google Translate get about 85% of it, but I could keep up with it, what they were talking about. And after the end of the first study, this lady said, well, I'd like for you to study with my sister. She's into witchcraft. Would you come back tomorrow? Let's go to my sister's house and let's study with her. Okay, so we did so. So we went over there, and it wasn't, when you hear witchcraft, you expect certain things, right? It wasn't anything like that at all. I'm not sure what she classified as witchcraft, but nonetheless, that's what she said. But we studied with her and her sister the next day. This lady kept coming back. I don't know if her sister ever got to attend or not, because her sister was taking care of her husband, who had been bedridden for over a year. And so she couldn't leave unless someone stayed with him. But nonetheless, I say all that to say that the young lady who was, the woman who was watching the baptism was extremely interested. And honestly, I'm waiting to hear about her being baptized, because she was studying more, and she actually requested prayers that she can continue her studies and gain a better understanding. She had been baptized in some denomination years before, and she recognized after the very first study, she said, I realized my baptism 30 years ago was wrong. And I thought, that's a pretty bold thing to say. But she seemed very sincere, so we're hopeful that she does obey the gospel. In every trip, there are what we call unique experiences. I thought of this section myself. I wasn't sure. Lisa said maybe we should just call it randoms, but there are unique experiences. You know, when you go, for instance, we went to the island of the Marshall Islands and went to Madro, and you land. I remember landing there, that the landing strip was so narrow. When you land, you can't even see land around you. You feel like you're landing on water, because you look to the left, you look to the right, all you see is water. It wasn't, of course, that way in San Jose, but there are some unique experiences. And when you go to a different country, one of the topics is the food. And I will say there was no issue with the food whatsoever. I know that's shocking for me to say that to you, but there wasn't any issue whatsoever. This was a breakfast we had at one of the restaurants nearby. The brethren provided lunch and dinner, so we were on our own for breakfast, which was just fine. You can see there's rice and beans there in the center next to the eggs, and then we have the tortilla. The top right above the tortilla is actually a piece of sausage, kind of like a summer sausage. And then you have pulled pork, you have plantains there, and then you have what looks like butter. It's actually a slice of queso cheese. That's how it was served. It was not melted like we think about here and you pour it over. There was none of that. It was just sliced there. And funny story, we were there, one of the last mornings we were there, went to a restaurant. I don't know why I did it, because the waitress spoke English. But I used Google Translate. I said, I'd like a ham and cheese omelet. I should have realized right away when you see the word tostadas in your translation, that's not what you're going to get. She came out with tortillas. She came out with toast. She came out with slices of ham, looked like lunch meat ham, and some cheese, and no eggs. It was not an omelet. Google did not translate that day. So one of the sisters there was kind enough to tell her this is what he meant to order, and she fixed it. But anyway, food was not an issue. Actually, one night, I think, twice, I believe, they served us hamburgers, and we had good hamburgers or chicken sandwiches. One brother told me that there's a sister there. He really wanted to be accommodating. That wanted to make sure that we had things that we were comfortable eating, and we certainly did. There was no issue whatsoever with that. In case you're wondering, the last night we did have cake. This is driving, I believe this is on our way back from San Jose to Tilleron. If you notice this big mountain, that's a volcano. I, silly me, did not know there was a volcano on Costa Rica until we got there. And then somebody said, are we going to go see the volcano? I said, you're going to go see what? But it was there. Obviously, nothing happened, but we did have an earthquake while we were there. I'm glad that didn't spur anything on. But that was something I was not used to seeing as you're driving there. When we left to go from San Jose back to, we left from Tilleron to go to San Jose to catch our plane to go back home. Originally, Wayne said, hey, let's leave at 8:30. And he said, no, I'm really concerned about traffic. Let's leave at 7:30. I said, okay, let's all leave at 7:30. Traffic can take many forms, which I'll get to in a moment. I got ahead of myself. I forgot. These are parrots just outside our hotel. I forgot this slide was in here, obviously. And they were there every single morning, chirping. As soon as they were talking to one another, they were there every single morning. Again, something unique I was not used to seeing. Sometimes you see them at different times around the park, which was just outside of where our hotel was. But anyway, I forgot these guys were here. Traffic can take many forms. These are what's called Brahma cows. You notice they have what looks like almost a second head growing out of their back, just above their neck. They're known to be very aggressive. That's why they don't have a lot of them here, they said. And I thought, well, if you have a hump in the back of your neck, you wouldn't be very happy either. But anyway, so we're leaving to go from Tilleron to San Jose. We run into this, and you can see this is actually John Griffin in his rented car in front of us. In front of him is Wayne. And behind us is Michael Richardson in the other van. And silly me, I thought, well, cows will move out of the way. No, they didn't care whatsoever. You had to brake and stop and wait for them to go across what they wanted to do. At one point, we don't have a picture of it, but John had stuck his hand out. I thought he was going to pet the cow. And he said, well, I thought better, but I thought he might actually dent the rental car. And I thought, well, that's probably not a good idea. But it took us probably 10 or 15 minutes to get through all of them. In Costa Rica, we were there during their winter, it's also the rainy season. We were there for 10 days. It rained 9 out of 10 days that we were there. One of the last days we were there, me and Brother Herman is his name. He was the preacher there at Canis. And so I didn't have a Bible class that afternoon for VBS. So I said, hey, let's go out to the square there in Tilleron, and let's just distribute tracts. And because it hadn't rained that day, I thought, okay, won't be any rain today. It looks like we're going to miss it. No. We walk from the church building up the hill, get to the square. We make one little lap around the square. He starts talking to someone. He gets in a very in-depth conversation with them, and it starts to rain. So we leave them some contact information, kind of wrap things up. And by the time we get across the street underneath an awning, it just pours down rain. And we stood there waiting for it to end for about 30 minutes. It didn't end. It just rained harder and harder and harder. So finally, after a while, he said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I don't want to walk back in this. So we called a couple members. They were out doing other things, part of the work. And it finally relented enough. He said, you want to just walk back? I said, okay, let's just walk back. So we did. But he was talking to this young man and young woman who was sitting on the park bench. And again, I don't speak Spanish, but we all probably know that here in the States, you walk up to someone and start talking to someone, you can kind of start getting a read on them because of their body language and the things they say and how they say it, right? Well, of course, in Costa Rica, I have no idea what their body language always means. They give you a smile sometimes. I can't understand what they're trying to say. And so he was talking with them. He's talking to them for a while, so I pulled up my phone and turned it on. I thought, I hope this doesn't say something goofy this time. And he was talking with them about them living together before marriage. I thought, wow, you really jump on that, don't you? But you know what? There was a reason for that, because clearly there was an issue there. I had no way of being able to tell that from them just sitting there talking. Now they were a couple, so they were very friendly with one another, obviously. But he picked on that pretty quickly, and he stood there and talked with them, a stranger, about what the Bible says about living together before marriage. And I turned on my translator just enough to hear what he was saying and get the point. I read a part there, I was holding it, listening, or reading it, and he said, this is Russ, he doesn't speak any English. And I just said, see. But it was interesting to see that it was just a reminder to me that the same problems they have in Costa Rica, like people living together before marriage or whatever it may be, is the same stuff we see here in the States, right? We all know individuals, or maybe know of individuals who have been doing those types of things or have concerns about a loved one who's doing those kinds of things. And so we have similar problems here. People are not so different no matter where we may live. So we were driving back from Tiburon to San Jose, and we get stopped. We're about 30 minutes in. It had been raining all the night before. It was raining again that morning, and they had a mudslide. You can see up where the dozer is. And the man said, I can clear this in about 40 minutes, which made me nervous. Clear a mudslide in 40 minutes? But anyway, and he said, but there's another spot about 7 kilometers up that's going to have another issue as well. So we had to turn around and come back. But again, like I mentioned before, we took a different route. The first time it took us, 4 or 5 hours to get to the hotel. It took us 9 hours to get from San Jose to Tiburon, which is not the norm. But when you go through the mountains and you have mudslides, you have traffic, so to speak, things just simply take longer. Of course, there are certain things you get to enjoy. This is one of Lisa's favorites. This is pistachio ice cream. We didn't get a picture of her fig ice cream. I never knew fig was an ice cream, but one of our brothers there, John Griffin, who is on our team, he talked about it and tried it, and I think he would eat anything. The only thing I had was felt like I was being brave because I was eating it, but I was pretty convinced he'd eat anything. But anyway, there were some certain things we got to enjoy after a hot day of door knocking. Now, we do want to we say all these things to give you an update about what we did there, because we do want you to know how much we appreciate the support of this congregation. Not only this congregation, but the congregation there in Rendon, Texas supported us. The congregation there in Crothersville, Missouri supported us as well. The 39th Street congregation supported us, helping us with that trip, and I'm very thankful for that. And this is going to be our last. We'll have just a few talking points here for us to consider before we close this evening. There's a song we sang several times while in Costa Rica, and we sing it here all the time. We all know it, right? Ring out the message. It's apparently not going to be on there.
That was the last song.
That was the last line?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, There's a song we sing. It's called Ring Out the Message. If you want to turn to Mark chapter 16, we'll just summarize this quickly. We know the song we sing is about going into all the world and spreading the gospel message, right? Reaching out to those who are around us. And the point of any mission trip is the same, or at least very similar to our same purpose here as members of this congregation. That is to reach out to those who are around us, right? When you look at Mark chapter 16 and verse 15, the Bible says, he said to them, "Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature." Go ye, right? We've heard people say sometimes a little cliche saying, "Go ye" means go me, but that's true. It applies to every Christian. He tells us there in verse 15, "Go into all the world," to our neighbor and to those neighbors who are next door and those who are in a distant land, right? The Apostle Paul didn't just go to his neighbor, he went everywhere, but we too are to go to our neighbor as well. He tells us what to do. He says to preach or to teach the gospel, he says, to every creature. To every creature. It means it doesn't matter who we're talking to. When I was in preaching school, Brother Ted Clark gave an illustration about how he was preaching at a congregation, and they were going out door knocking, and they were driving around their church van. He said, "We're coming up on some tracks," and one of the members said, "No, we don't go over there. We don't go across the tracks. We stay on this side when we door knock." That's not every creature, is it? See, we are to reach out to everyone who's around us, no matter who they are, what lifestyle they may have chosen, what things they may be involved in, because the only way we're going to reach the lost is we talk to them. You know, we are to reach out to those who are around us. We are to do our very best, which was going to be another point on here, to have Bible studies with those who will study with us. And thirdly and lastly, to encourage one another. It was a tremendous encouragement to be able to visit those brothers and sisters in Christ all the way in Costa Rica. I know they also were very encouraged. It was very difficult. The last night we were there saying goodbye, there was a lot of tears that were shed, both by the team and by those who were working with as well. It's very hard to say goodbye with those who you have done so much with. But I'm thankful we were able to be a part of it. But I want us to remember that we too can be a part of it as well, each and every day. As Christians, we have a chance to reach out to those who are around us. Let's be those who are wise enough and courageous enough to take advantage of those opportunities. This evening we can help you anyway. You can come forward now. Together we stand and sing the song that's been selected.